Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a call to order. It's the Bridgeport Board of Education's Governance Committee meeting. The time is now 6:04 p.m. In attendance live is Joe Sokolovic, Board Chair. Online is Committee Member Joseph Lombard. We've got Dr. Karen Baldwin on staff. Mr. Albert Benhand, Committee Member, also in attendance. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes dated January 18th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I shall second. Do we find any errors, omissions of a material nature that need to be corrected?
No, nothing.
And I have nothing either, so hearing that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Next up, we have policy number 9130, construction and posting of the agenda. Did you send that to me?
I'm trying to make sure I have it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
Will
I've
these-
got some. I've
Will
got
this be
some.
posted on the screen, Joe?
Yeah, I'm trying to get that done now. And
Okay.
I got suggested revisions I want to make
Yep.
to it. So I got it here, but I got it here. It's only on paper. So I'm trying to get it on the screen right now. Just bear with us for a minute.
All right. Let me get my copy. Hold on.
No, it wasn't put in the portal yet. Because these are just basically suggested revisions because they're mine and this is what I'm working off to just start this discussion.
Mr.
Right.
Sokolovic,
Yes.
the only documents that I have are the edible documents for the 5,000 series and the 9,000. That was sent to me through the superintendent's office. I don't have what you're referring. I can email.
Okay, give me one
It's
more.
on here.
No, it'll probably.
I'm sending it right now.
Oh, you got it.
One
Thank you,
second.
Miss.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
And if you could do the other two as well, please.
All right, so that solves that.
You want the editable ones posted?
So
up
the
as
one
well?
I amended in red.
Okay,
We're starting with 9130, followed by 9140. Yes. 516. There, I'll get it more together. Next, construction and posting of the agenda is what it is. Meeting. Okay. Yeah, I'm also forwarding it, Mr. Lombard, I'm also forwarding it to your email as well. Maybe you can bring it up there while we work this out.
The one with your edits?
Yeah, I'm sending the first one right now.
Okay, thank you.
I got it in separate emails. How the heck? And I'm forwarding it to you, Sam, so maybe you can get it for. Okay, I just sent it in the email to both Mr. Lombard and Sam and Mr. Marini. And I'll try to do this beforehand next time for a little more ease of transition. Because these aren't staff edits, it's not the existing policy, it's just what I'm going to suggest tonight as a starting point.
I just sent 3 from Arlene. Are those the same ones you sent me or?
I just sent you the first one that we're working on now, so you can, either way to find it is quicker. And the next one after this will be 9140.
Okay, I've got it.
And if we'll let yeah, well, if we could bring that up on a screen, we could discuss it while he's bringing it up on a screen. All right, the changes are in 1A. It's just a gender-based change to make it the gender-neutral language. And then in 1B, again, I struck chairman, added chairperson. Okay, wait. The final, okay, let me read out the last sentence. The final decision as to whether the item is included on an agenda lies with the chairman. That's the original language. The new language I wish it to read would be the final decision as to whether an item is included on the agenda lies with the chairperson. Unless the agenda item is requested by 3 or more members, then the item must be added to the agenda. Then add the words to the agenda. Thoughts on that part?
Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking the same thing when I read it through. So this is saying basically, if a member of the board presents it, the chairperson makes the decision, but you're adding into this B, the fact that comes up later in this policy, that if 3 or more members mention it, then it can be, yeah, I almost feel like it's not necessary because it's brought up later. I'm thinking this B is specifically addressing if a single member brings something to the attention of the chairperson.
Correct. Yeah, I'm sorry, were you finished?
Yeah.
It is slightly redundant, but not as redundant as you may think, because this gives the option of, say, if I bring up that I want to have churros given to every student, it's ridiculous. The board chair will say no. Then I would be able to seek 2 other board members. Hey, 2 other reasonable board members will never sign on to that item. But say if I want to bring something at a regular board meeting that makes sense, that's time sensitive, and we want it on a regular agenda, and we don't want to go through the process of a special meeting, which at time could actually, under the current bylaws, make the point moot by the time the special meeting is listed. So it's just an extra slight redundancy as opposed to the thing.
Yeah,
I
actually,
would-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would share with the committee that this revision that you suggest is quite common and does allow for, I think, more transparency and a better opportunity for the board members to work together around critical issues and make sure that they're being heard. So in my experience, this revision that you're suggesting is not uncommon and makes good sense.
Thank you. Mr. Lombard?
Yes. Reading further down, it actually does not mention about 3 members. It only mentions about 2/3. So this actually is the only other place that it's mentioned.
I think we got some similar language in the special meetings to your defense. And Mr. Benhan?
No, I'm okay. Well, you got this.
Okay with that language? Okay.
Sound good.
Okay, now the next change, it will be in 2B. Gender change, just to change.
I just want to discuss this a little further so I understand. So up until all this time until now, it would have to go to a special meeting. You'd have 3 members or more calling for a special meeting. And
Correct.
Instead you're saying 3 members or more can make something appear on the regular meeting agenda now by us
Correct.
adding. Okay.
Yeah, and that'll limit the number of times we have to have special meetings because as you remember, in your experience in the past, we've had 1 meeting with no agenda items and then a special meeting two days later.
Well,
with agenda.
like I said, further along in this pre-existing policy, it talks about items being added to the regular agenda by a
Correct.
2/3 vote. Or maybe instead of saying 2/3, I mean, by vote, doesn't mean does it have to be present in the meeting or requesting the item be on the agenda? How is this?
The other one's addressing adding to the agenda at the meeting.
That is correct.
Right, so I feel like they should be in line with each other. If the thought is that in order to have things on the regular meeting agenda, like currently, if something wants to be addressed by 3 members, they can request a special meeting. But generally speaking, the agenda is managed by the chairperson.
Correct.
And I would say what does not currently, this is just for discussion, of course.
Sure.
What does not currently exist is a way for board members to be ensured that their agenda item will be included. What currently exists is that a board member may request, but it's up to the purview of the chairperson. And
Correct.
now we're saying that there should be a way that it will appear on the regular meeting agenda.
Absolutely.
Which the chairperson has a management of. So I'm thinking, again, for discussion, that we could stick with the similar guidelines that already exist for adding an agenda item, that you would need 2/3 to put it on. But it's still, we still have that 3 members can call for a special meeting.
Correct.
It's a thought I have.
Right, and this is an intention of compromise between the old language. The old language, the chair was mandated to put it on by the submission of one board member, which actually did lead to a lot of ridiculousness and 20-page long agenda items, not including the churro example, but some things that were pretty close to the churro example. And it wasted a lot of time just putting them on the agenda. This gives us the best of both worlds, have it appearing on the regular agenda, but it must have 3 because 3 people won't. And 2/3 is kind of a steep hill to climb. And the
Well-
reason it's a separate language on a special meeting is because that's a whole different ball game altogether, and that's something.
Yeah, I hear you, and I appreciate that. And I want to continue this conversation because, the rest of the edits are just making gender neutral the language from chairman to chairperson. So this really is the bulk of the language. And I think this calls to mind something that happened on Monday. On Monday, anyone who was watching, and for those of us who were there, we had a 4-hour, 15-minute meeting.
Correct.
That is uncalled for. We kept rank and file staff on until 10:45 p.m. And in my opinion, the last few items of the agenda just got pushed through. We didn't really discuss them. For whatever reason, we just didn't really discuss them. So what I'm wondering is there a place that we should have on this particular agenda construction policy, something about removing things? Because in my opinion, all of those items did not need to, as far as time sensitive is concerned, did not need to be addressed on Monday's night's meeting. And some of the items that were on there could have been postponed until a later meeting, even though they were placed onto the agenda earlier in the timeline, earlier in the week. They were put there, and then the others that were more time sensitive came on at the end of the timeline. There needs to be a way that it's acceptable that even though something is passed to be on the agenda, can be tabled or removed. And I don't know how that should be spoken in the policy.
Right, that absolutely already exists. I can't quote the policy verbatim, but well, it's me and you, so it wouldn't pass. But if there was 3 of us in this meeting right now, and you felt the meeting was going long, and it was something that you felt wasn't time sensitive that we could pick up, you could make a motion to table, and if you had a second vote, and I wanted to keep going, that motion would be tabled. So that's already a process that exists.
But what about removing it from the agenda in the first place? Just
Well,
tabling.
a tabling or postponing will have the same effect.
No, but I'm saying from the get-go, so people who might be from the district staff or other public people that come to the meeting expecting it to be addressed wouldn't even come to the meeting because it would be removed from the agenda.
If I may, let me try and add into the discussion around the construction of the agenda and what those items are. To your point, Mr. Lombard, Monday night was quite lengthy. And one of the pieces that I'm wondering about in terms of our current structure of the agenda, and maybe there's a manner to help facilitate so that we take less time, because a lot of time was spent with the full board discussing policies, right? And we as a committee have worked together in a fulsome, timely way on those policies. But understandably, the rest of the board had great interest in role of the board and board conduct in those pieces. And so I'm wondering, on the board agenda right now, when we have committee updates where people say, oh, when are student and families meeting? When has finance met? When is contracts meeting? I'm wondering if at that time, because we're having this meeting, if on February 27th, Mr. Sokolovic under governance shares, yes, we met on February 15th. We reviewed these policies. A big part of our discussion on policy 9130 dealt with the construction of the agenda, where you write an update. And that way, you know, we're trying to help all of our board members gain some ownership of what's happening in each committee, so that when it comes to the board, and you could say, I anticipate bylaw 9130 coming to the board for a first read, you know, in March, and that way people have a responsibility, you know, to reach out to you and say, I have real interest in this. Can you tell me about the discussion, which might help some of the discussion there. So I'm just wondering, we might have a mechanism to help us that's already right there on the agenda. In terms of removing things, you absolutely could, though the two commissioner network presentations,
were done.
well, yeah, two different schools, but they were time sensitive, and I don't, they have to be submitted by Friday, and the board needed to have approval of that. I think in the past it didn't always go to the board, but, you know, we're trying to work together and be transparent around our work in our schools.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if the chairperson, I agree that should be the wording. If the chairperson ultimately, you know, submits the agenda to district office to be publicized and then distributed amongst the board members, so it goes through the chairperson. If the chairperson sees that it's too wieldy,
Mm-hmm.
what ability does the chairperson have prior to publishing the agenda, which may have items that were presented with 3 or more board members, so they should be there, and may have other items, so they should be there. What ability does the chairperson, I don't know the answer to this, which is why I'm asking. What ability does the chairperson have to not offer them on the agenda, even though 3 or more board members asked for it, to say, no, not yet, not this meeting?
I'll give you an example. Okay, maybe actually we could maybe make a slight amendment to state somewhere after the one board member has to be rejected first before bringing, because that would allow the chairperson time to say, no, I got a full agenda, or what have you, because the agenda doesn't get posted until the Thursday before, right? So say if I go to, I'm going to use names right now, it's easier because we got the people right now. Yeah, if I go to Ms. Brown and I say I want this on the agenda, and she tells me it's too full, it is now 3 or 4 days before the meeting, she don't put it on the agenda, so then I say, just to protect myself, to make sure it's on the meeting at the next agenda, or to protect the board, what have you, I'll go to maybe Mr. Benahan and yourself to make sure it's included on the next agenda. Does that make sense?
So maybe what you're saying is it should be included in one of the next two meetings. Because again, for some unforeseen reasons, it's possible again. This is for conversation. It's possible again that at the next meeting there's, you know, these very time sensitive things, and the chairperson may on his or her own discretion say, at this moment, this takes precedent. But if instead it's stated that it must be included within the next 2 regular board meetings, then those 3 board members know it will be addressed. It won't be pushed off.
Right.
Maybe that would be a compromise, maybe.
Right, and if I may further allay your concerns, suppose we didn't have a meeting on Monday and our next scheduled meeting was next Monday. What would we do with those time-sensitive issues? we would have called a special meeting, which is also a tool in the toolbox for the chair if the agendas become too unwieldy, which this actual policy is trying to limit special meetings, because if the same 3 board members could call a special meeting, everybody got to come out for one more meeting rather than just have it added to the regular meeting.
I see the need for what you're editing, what you're recommending. I think it should be a separate letter, separate from B. You know, B is basically saying any board member has the ability to request something.
Correct.
But it is the chairperson's decision whether or not it will be. A separate thing, when 3 or more members request something, it must be. And then I think, even though what you were saying about a special meeting could be called for time sensitive, I think just in general, the chairperson needs to have some flexibility.
Absolutely.
To decide what should be on the next immediate agenda and what can wait. But if things are required by the bylaws that they must be on there, and then that has to go, maybe something else that may seem more pressing may not make it. So maybe, I don't know if it makes sense what you and I were talking
Yeah,
about.
that's right.
If not this one, then the next one. So within the next 2 regular meetings, you know, something like that, you know, because it is a separate thing. One board member having a request is lovely. That's one person having a request, and the chairperson can honor that or not. But when you've got 3 or more, I hear you. You know, it's like, let's put it on the agenda, but let's give them the time to put it on. So
let's try this.
Could I make a suggestion as I'm listening to this? Perhaps, as you say, there's the 1 board member request, and then there's the 3 or more. And then the challenge of the 3 or more is, what do we do if it's an unwieldy current agenda? And so maybe the language, a separate item could be, the chairperson, upon review of the existing agenda, can determine the date for those new items not to be later than 3 future board meetings, you know, so it gives, hopefully it can be the next agenda, but if it can't, it won't be later than the 3rd future date.
Can we say, right, can we say second, because if, say me, Mr. Lombard and Mr. Benham, we have one of those items to 3, we also got another tool in the toolbox, which is the special meeting. And that would cause, if I felt the item was important enough, to pull at least 2 other board meetings and then drag us all into a special meeting to come out to hear an item that could have been included in the regular meeting.
Joe, what's the current timeline requirement for when the special meeting has to be held? 2 weeks? If 3 or more
14 days, and that's the next item up on the agenda, the next policy up.
Well, maybe we need to talk about that a little bit right now, because we're talking about timelines right now. Are you suggesting making it shorter, or what are you suggesting?
Yeah, I'm definitely making it shorter. Attempting to make it shorter. Let me not misspeak.
So given that sentiment, I think, you know, the next 2 board meetings would be adequate, because that would be 3 weeks at most, you know.
Can you add the language you just mentioned?
Sure.
Okay.
Can I just ask, under construction of agenda number 1, we have the gender language, gender neutral for A. For B, do you want B to be 1 board member, and then do you want C to be 3 or more?
Correct.
Okay. And then D would be the language we're suggesting up to the next 2, within the next 2 board meetings, that the chairperson will review.
Right.
Although maybe the only reason why I'm thinking maybe that could be part of C is because it only applies to C when there's 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Lombard.
Okay.
Okay, and the only other thing on this, on 9130, is the gendered language and, okay, here we go, strikeouts on the general order of business. Oh, I'm sorry. Right.
B, we're under.
Yeah. We're under on the bottom of the page.
D.
The D, general order of business, as struck and its timing
Where is this?
at each meeting shall be as
At
follows.
the end of the.
At the end,
page.
very, very bottom of the first page.
Thank you both. All right.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
And I struck out all the times. Oh, wait, one that I made, I didn't actually save. 1, 2, 3. I added student representative reports between public comments.
Otherwise, those are the same items as always.
Correct, and that would be 5, that would be student representative reports would be 5.
Oh, after
And
public
everything
comment?
else, the numbers would change,
No,
yeah.
you have it. You have number 4?
Flip over.
Yeah, no, but you have, so that doesn't mean number 4, and then number 5 will be public comments?
No, number 4 would be public comment, number 5 would be student representative
Okay.
reports. They usually come after public comment, correct?
It might be beneficial to move them up, though, for some of the same reasons that Mr. Lombard spoke about the length of the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Benahan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I prefer to have a student represent, before the public comment.
Yes.
Knowing that sometimes we got full students and we don't want it to take too long, and sometimes I try to avoid drama, so. So it's much better to have them, early so they can leave early. You don't want to stay, that's fine, but they have to go to school, next day. That's my opinion.
Right. Yeah, actually, I agree. And there's also an additional benefit that everybody there for public comment got to listen to the students and get their perspective on things and find out what's going on in their schools, rather than sometimes people give their public comment and leave. Yeah.
Joe,
What do you think?
further up, there's just one, it's now C. It says all meeting notices and agendas. See that? Or meeting cancellation notices. And so we file with the city clerk, posted at the administrative office of the board, as well as post. So you took out the word and, just wondering, that's the only other change.
Oh, wait. Hold on one moment, please. Oh, I took out, yeah, also,
A couple of things are different. B
yeah,
is
you're
different.
correct. Yeah, and B, thank you, I'm sorry. There was a potential lack of a quorum. We always have a potential lack of a quorum. If we got an affirmative lack of a quorum, sure. And I struck lack of sufficient information to efficiently conduct business. We've always got enough business to hear public comments. We always have enough business to hear committee reports. We always have enough business to hear, did I say student reps or public comment before? We've always got sufficient capacity to hold that. And every canceled meeting is one less opportunity for the public to interface with us. So there'll be maybe a 20, 25-minute meeting, but there's sufficient agenda items for people to be heard. Because what has happened in the past sometimes is when it was a controversial subject, it would be postponed while the people were heated, so we didn't have to hear from them in their raw emotion. And it was put on a special meeting, which is a whole other thing where we got the public comment changed, that they're gonna be able to public comment, another way to avoid that.
Yeah, I would say that I agree that we shouldn't have a way out of meeting. There are things to discuss. But then a couple things, just little grammatical, I guess. We want to add the word or, board members as it relates to inclement weather or lack of a quorum, or-
Yes,
But also, I was thinking, we can't think of every scenario, so maybe it's not necessary.
no doubt.
But
That's why we leave it broad.
But the where it talks about inclement weather, I was just also thinking something that does happen is sometimes there's things that happen with the facility, be it, whatever reason, there could be flooding or no HVAC or I'm not saying we can't mention every possible scenario, but I'm wondering.
Or dangerous conditions,
Or some condition, yeah.
or dangerous conditions, hazardous conditions,
Yeah, maybe something like that. Just to have it in there,
or other hazards.
or other hazards. That's nice.
Inclement weather, other hazards, or lack of a quorum.
Okay.
That sound?
Mhm.
Well,
And-
did you track that?
Yeah, the grammar, yeah. That makes sense.
All right, so wait, now. posting. Including the BPS, as well as posting to the BPS website. I'm not sure, so, do you see anything else I missed that I struck out?
No, I would just say again, grammar, where it says posting to the BPS website, that should just say posted. In my opinion, it should say posted.
Okay, awesome. And are we all okay with striking the timelines because we never stick to them anyway, and we're
Oh,
actually.
yeah, those have to go. Those have to go.
Right,
There's no-
we're actually in violation every board meeting we have because we never moved to suspend the bylaw, and the student reports being inserted back to 4 this late. One of the things I read from the attorneys at one point was if we include it in the agenda, I mean, in the bylaws, we have to do it. So that's the reason for inserting the student reports, because I think I had to try to argue for them to get back 3 times already. So, and I don't ever want to see them neglected. And sometime in the future, when we get parent district pack again, we got to revisit this and stick the district pack in there as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so are we good on this one?
Yes.
So let's entertain a motion to put this on the next available agenda for a first read.
Well, that's a little different. All right, yes, so moved.
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I'll contact the board chair. Get this one. Oh, by the way, we did.
I have a procedural question because I'm
Sure.
naive. You mentioned about putting it on, requesting that it goes on the next agenda. Is it different when it's coming from a committee than it is just a single board member? I would have thought that if it's coming from a committee, it's more like normal that it would make its way.
Yeah, it's more likely than not, and I don't really see the need to differentiate because the committee does have 3 people. If we push something unanimous and the chair refuses to put it on, then we got 3 easy people.
No, right. I agree. I didn't know if it already was different, if it's already a
Right.
different thing in
No,
practice.
it's not. No,
It's not. So it's the same thing then prior to this, it's just saying, asking for it to go and hoping.
Right.
Oh, got it, okay.
I
Well,
don't think, right, I don't think I've ever been refused from committee
Right,
an agenda item that I put.
right. But like, just to finish the conversation we just had, just back to the example of Monday.
Sure.
We put forth some revisions to some policy that we wanted first read and voted on, and I was all for that. But the way things shook out with the other agenda items, in my opinion, our request could have been postponed to, let's say, potentially the next meeting. Or that's an example of what I'm talking about. Like, I would want the work we do in committee to make its way on the agenda, otherwise why are we doing it? But I would want the chairperson to have that ability, even though it's coming from the 3 people of the committee, say, well, this next meeting is not the right one because of other considerations, but that we wouldn't ask for a special meeting for this. We wouldn't be saying we need a special meeting, but that we know it's going to make its way in the next, we're saying 2 meetings. It's going to make its way in the next 2 meetings. Like, I think this is a perfect example of that because it happened on Monday.
Yeah. In theory, and in this meeting, I could agree, but there's some things that don't lend itself to theory, which as same party members, we could caucus about this afterwards.
I think the order of business is important,
Yes.
though, right? I agree with all of you. The committee work needs to get to the board because administration recognizes that that's the board's business. You're doing work in committee, and the work needs to be presented to the full board and to the community because there are implications for whether it's policy. This example. But I think the bigger challenge is the order of the business, and then if we get those, like the turnaround plans for the commissioners network, if they were earlier in the agenda and took longer, the board may have determined that you're going to table some of the policy discussion just because it's getting late. But it's tabled, it'll go on the next agenda. So I think making sure that collectively through the chairperson and administrative staff and the interim superintendent, that sort of taking a look at what we think is the most important work of the board on that agenda and making sure that time is provided for it.
That's a very, very good point. Thank you. Because that can take care of.
Right. If there's nothing else on this point, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Benahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going back what Mr. Lombard said in the beginning, and it's very important. That's why we got committed. So discuss to the, and then bring it to the board. I know this agenda Monday was, it was long, but I don't feel that agenda Monday, we have to discuss so many things. That's why we got committed. That's why we chair to discuss and then bring it to the board and then vote or maybe, something simple. But we cannot have that again, please. I just want to put that.
See, that's it. See, that's
Too much.
right. Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of the conversation was from, I'm not gonna call anybody out.
Yeah.
But on items that were presented to the full board more than once over time, and then people who weren't in attendance finally discovering some changes needed to be made, and that extended the conversation. Another that I don't foresee many 4-hour meetings because a couple of those items were also on a prior agenda, and due to technical FOIA reasons, we had to rehear them. But everybody on the board heard that exact same information, which is why I tried to put that past. But one of the people who absents themselves from many meetings for whatever variety of reason, because we're all busy, wanted to hear the whole presentation again. Barring that, we save at least an hour and change at the meeting. So it's up to us as board members too, because we could make the meeting extra long by not making ourselves knowledgeable about the agenda items, not looking and reading our packets, which have all the information in it, and not coming to meetings prepared. So that's our responsibility as board members.
I agree with you, Mr. Chair.
Not ask questions that should be relatively easy to read within your packet.
And everyone received the same package, so you need to have time for read. If you don't have the time, I'm sorry, we cannot be waiting behind because, take too long.
But I don't foresee many more 4-hour meetings with agendas. Okay, anyway, are we done with this item? We can move on.
Yes.
Okay, you sure? All right, I'm not trying to rush anybody, but.
Are you going to send the next one with your revisions?
Okay, can you bring that on the screen of 9140? Do you got the 9140?
Oh, it's just the one that was there, the packet.
Right. Yeah, I just sent the first one. It's coming up on the screen. There's not as many changes on this one. In the future, I'll email the committee if I'm anticipating, especially somebody online ahead of time. I just don't want to get into this situation where we're discussing back and forth. Is creating a quorum and holding an outside meeting that's not noticed. That's the only reason it's coming up now.
Mhm.
Okay, you see 9140. Could you scroll down to 2 special meetings, please? Uh-oh. No, it's not encompassed there. Hold on. I'm gonna have to send another email. They should have highlights in red. Is that the one I sent you or the one? Oh wait, I didn't send it to you. I'm sorry.
Send it to me too.
Sam, it's gonna be the Word document. Sorry.
Yeah, see, I don't have numbers for them though.
Yeah, that's my fault.
What's the name?
Time, place, and notice of meeting?
Yes. Next time, I'll keep that in mind.
Got
You sent it, Joe?
it.
No, I can't see that. Can you make that one page? There we go. Thank you.
Now, this one, please go down to number 2. Oh, yes. Especially focused on the red, yes. Okay, if you see an A, you asked before in the last thing, I put 7 days. And again, I changed from 14 days to 7 days. 14 days is the statutory maximum according to the law. I put it to 7 days. I did not add the language calendar days because that'll give an extra couple of days just to work things out. I think seven regular days would be fine. That'll extend out to nine days from the current like 20. I think with the 14 days, not mentioning calendar, that leaves 2 weekends in there. So you got at least 18, 19 days.
I would prefer 14 calendar days.
14 calendar
I
days.
think 7 or 9. I think that's really kind of tight for anybody to have.
Can I ask you why you want 14 days?
Because I think if a request comes, remember now, these 3 board members can put it on the regular agenda now, which they couldn't do before. So now they can put it on a regular agenda. That meeting will be within 2 weeks. And that's great. But if they feel that they prefer to have a special meeting for whatever reason, they don't want to have it on the regular meeting, I still think that time needs to be given for everyone's schedules so we can actually make that meeting. I don't think it should be compressed. And considering that the statutory minimum is 14 or maximum is 14, it's not asking for anything, out of that's unheard of. So, but I would agree that you could say calendar days, so it doesn't turn into 16 or 17 days. That's my reason.
I would also just remind the board committee that often there's work that needs to be conducted by administration for perhaps information or material that needs to be shared with the board at a special meeting. And so if we were within 7 days, I think that would be potentially incredibly taxing. Like if we use last night or Monday night as an example, if we had a 7-day turnaround, we'd be looking at a special meeting next Wednesday, and we're still trying to work with the state on the turnaround plans and get people to training for turnaround plans and, just the day-to-day work of the system. And then in this scenario, we'd be responsive for potentially, sharing information about moving students from Cross to Hooker, and so we just want to be mindful of what might be asked of administration in a short turnaround.
Gotcha.
It's not always the case. Sometimes the special meeting is really more to be responsive to the public and to your governance role, but there may be times where administration needs to inform you of something.
So
Yeah, okay, so I got calendar days. Any willingness to compromise backwards a little? I could drop definitely to 7. It's easy to drop because it does hearing that explanation. If we could go to maybe, because I find that 14 days a bit long.
I think the calendar days is the compromise, because before 14 days, if that was 14 business days, that could be 3 weeks. So now you're saying 14 calendar days, literally 2 weeks. That's the time frame. So that's what I would say is the compromise.
Okay, I guess I could accept that. Okay, so moving on to B. If such meeting is not called within, I'll change that day to 14 calendar days. The lead requesting board member shall have the authority to compel the superintendent to cause the meeting to be scheduled.
So this is an addition, you're adding this in?
Correct. If such meeting fails to achieve or maintain a quorum, such meeting shall become an information session, which will be continued to be live streamed and archived as if it was a regular meeting. The intention of this is, right now, there's no mechanism for the meeting to be called if the chair refuses. This creates a mechanism for it to get on the agenda. To get the meeting called.
Again, I feel like we've created a new mechanism in the last policy that did not exist before. So it seems to me that and I'm sure there are absolutely incidents where 3 board members or more would want a special meeting and would not want it on the regular meeting for whatever reason that would be. But now they have a mechanism that it will be, if this gets approved by the rest of the board, within the next 2 meetings. It will be. So this is really backed up and supported by that. So if for some reason, it wasn't held, but it could be on a regular meeting.
Right.
So you see what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, but this would invest in 3 people calling the meeting as opposed to the 3 people putting it on a regular agenda, which there's no such mechanism involved in that process to compel anything be put on the agenda, because the chair still has the authority over the agenda totally. But this slightly limits the chair's power.
Well, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought that's what we were just taking away from the chairperson, was their ability to say no. I thought that's what we just talked about.
Well, they still have the ability to say no in the regular board meeting, because if you back up to the item, there's no way to compel it on definitely and absolutely. But this one takes out the chair if the chair is, say, rogue or whatever have you, and compels the superintendent to have to call that meeting at the 3 members' request.
I don't think that's appropriate. I don't know the legalities of this, but I don't think the superintendent should be calling board meetings.
No, not calling, scheduling. It's the board members that are calling. It's the 3 board members that requested it calling the meeting. The superintendent is just bypassing. The superintendent follows the bylaws, so she normally follows the powers that are implied with the chairperson. But if we vest that power somewhere else, the board.
I don't support this.
I think, in my experience, the 9,000 series of policies are really deeply managed and reviewed by the board. Certainly the superintendent in partnership, the superintendent and board relationship, I think, can be thought of as perhaps a bow tie. And the superintendent is in the middle, is the knot in the bow tie. And the superintendent goes to one side of governance with the board and slides over to the other side of the bow tie with the administrative team. That's the only position in the organization that really floats between both. But the superintendent, I think this is not legal. You cannot compel the superintendent based on the actions of the 3 from the previous bylaw to schedule a meeting. It's not the superintendent's role. The superintendent has this very interesting role of working with the board and working with district leaders and building-based leaders. But in this scenario, any lead person of 3 could be compelling the superintendent quite often to be doing this if, for whatever reason, the chair is unable to. And so I think I'm with Mr. Lombard. I'd be concerned about that. It certainly, it doesn't read like the respectful sort of bow tie relationship. I understand what you're trying to address.
So let's try a reword. Meeting is not called within 14 calendar days. Request to the item shall be scheduled at the requesting.
I have a suggestion.
Yes, sir.
I have a suggestion, and this would bridge the last policy with this policy. Because there is a difference and a different intention and a purpose for having a special meeting and having an agenda item on a board meeting, a regular meeting.
Correct.
However, if such meeting is not called within 14 calendar days, the items of that agenda, proposed agenda, will appear on the next regular board meeting. Something like that, because effectively, it could be required by these same three members that their agenda item be on the next one or two board meetings. But in this case, the person would have had 14 days already, the chairperson, and if they still didn't schedule the special, and maybe there was a reason, maybe the chairperson said, you know what, gathering everybody together for a special is not going to work. I'd rather have it be on the regular meeting. It gives that both sides, the chairperson and the three people requesting, a little bit of play, in the game. Like, this is the best way to do this in this case. What are your thoughts about that, Deputy Superintendent Baldwin?
I think that makes good sense. And I agree with you. Not every special meeting isn't scheduled because of, an intent not to schedule it. It could be many other things. And so I think it makes good sense to clearly state that it'll end up on the next regular meeting of the board. It's really clear, and it's not creating this tension between the board and the superintendent, and which I think is good, because if you keep that image of the bow tie, you want that superintendent to be able to really work with you on these matters. And so I think it makes sense. We've made some good recommendations for 9130. To Mr. Lombard's point, this helps to connect a little bit of a through line between 9130 and now 9140.
Okay. I've been beaten down again, so let's try this. If such meeting is not called within 14 calendar days, it shall appear on the next regular.
The proposed agenda items of that meeting shall appear on the next regular board meeting agenda.
Correct.
Right.
So, Ben, have you have any comments on this?
No, I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
Sorry.
I feel everybody, not part of the committee, but as a board member, I feel that 14 days is too much. That's the way I feel.
Yeah, well, we did in fact shave 4 days off, because as you know, we never had it. Like, if we did it on Tuesday, it would never be a Tuesday. It could get pushed to Friday because of the weekends included. This clears up that. And if in fact we do pass 14 days, we got to be aware that we're also in violation of state statutes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because the state statute provides that protection. What I was trying to do is get a little more ahead of state statute to save some time. And I do believe I shaved 4 days off of that with the calendar.
Yes.
thing. So I'm pretty happy with that compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I want everything I want, but hey, I'm not going to get it. Do you have anything else on this?
Well, you have the next one. If such meeting fails to achieve or maintain a.
Oh,
quorum.
yeah, I'm sorry. I scratched all of that. I just left, if such meeting is not called within 14 calendar days, it shall appear on the next regular board meeting agenda.
Okay.
Period, and the sentence end of change.
And that's it for the quorum stuff.
Correct.
Okay, because we're not having that anymore. All right. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think it should, instead of saying it shall appear, I think it should specify it's requested agenda items shall appear. So that way we don't miss any of the agenda items there. If the special meeting had like 2 or 3, they would all.
Right, you did say that. Did you capture that?
I did. I wrote the proposed agenda items will be placed on the next regular agenda of the Board of Education.
Yeah, I know. I did say proposed, but maybe requested is better. Either one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The requested agenda items will be placed on the next regular meeting agenda of the Board of Education.
So, Joe, I think that's good. I think that will avoid things never being called, especially.
Right, absolutely.
So I think that's good. So,
Okay.
Mhm.
So are we all okay with this? The language has changed?
Mhm.
Yes.
All right, so I'll seek a motion to place 9140 on the agenda of the regular board meeting for a first read.
So moved. Oh,
Just second. All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Sokolovic,
Yes,
will you
ma'am.
be able to email to me your red line, your
Yeah.
versions? That way I can play
Right,
with
yeah,
them
yeah.
and, perfect, thank you.
Oh, and one more thing, a board member had brought up to me is like, it's a little sometimes hard to see the strikeouts. I know that's part of it. The strikeouts in black. We
Okay,
could change all the language to red, including the strikeouts is probably a little easier.
okay. Often when I read like a proposed contract or a legal document, the new language is black and bold. And then strikeout language in red? Or do you want to do it differently?
Right. No, yeah, well, it's like suggest a person, somebody who actually reads it, really, that's how they already have it, but,
I'm happy-
yeah, no, I think anything but black,
Okay.
black on the strikeouts.
Okay,
And maybe the strikeouts could be red, maybe the strikeouts could be red and,
we just need to help them see that.
right, and another,
Right.
and,
Okay.
others in.
You know what,
green.
we'll draft
Yeah.
draft one of these changes and
Yeah,
share
and
it
see
with
what it
you,
looks like,
and
right.
we'll see how it looks.
Right, just for better reason. All right, so the next item on the agenda, we just did 9140, correct? So now we're on 9170, quorum and voting procedures. This should be a quick one. I think I have 91. Do you have that one?
91.7 is quorum and voting procedures. 91.70.
Got it. And this one has one change recently come to my mind because of what happened on a city council. Their charter is not clear with the number of members they got, and they had a two-thirds vote of the existing city council that passed, but since the one short, they were counting the two-thirds from the 20. And if you look at it, it says the majority of all members of the board shall be necessary to constitute a quorum for transaction of business. Now, let's say me and Mr. Benahan, we just got upset today and we resign tomorrow.
Mhm,
That leaves us with 7.
mhm,
Your quorum would be 4,
mhm.
but under current policy, the quorum would still be 5 because that all language is kind of ambiguous.
Maybe you could say sitting instead of current, because I think it's implied, but if you're concerned about it, maybe
Right.
something you said, because just, the majority of all members of the board, well, if there are only 7 members of the board, it's the majority of the 7 members. I don't think it needs to be said, but.
Yeah, right. I don't know if you were following the charter revision in the
No.
news that
No.
they had two-thirds of the city council that were sitting at the time, but the language is ambiguous, and the lawyer stated that, no, there's 20 council members, so we got to go with whatever the two-thirds was, 16?
Even though some seats were vacant?
Correct, and this will clear that up, and it will never happen to us.
Mhm.
Okay, no,
Mhm.
I understand. Majority of
All current, I could add the words, all current sitting.
no, I think current, it's fine. Majority of all, I don't know what the right word is, what the right legal word is to use.
Right, but I think current's unambiguous enough that anybody who reads it, current, should there be less than 9, actually further clarifies the current members of the board. And it doesn't touch if there is 9, it's still 5 as a
Do
quorum.
you want to just say for A, the Bridgeport Board of Education is a 9-member board. A quorum of the board in this setting is 5, and then 5 members. And then if there are fewer than 9 sitting, right? Because in your example, if you and Mr. Benahan resigned, there's 7 sitting. If there's fewer than 9 sitting, it requires a simple majority of that number. Right? Wouldn't that,
That,
is that what you want to have happen?
Well,
correct, but to my taste, I don't know, it's, no disrespect, it seems a little wordy.
I'm not surprised.
maybe something like the majority of all currently sitting members of the board, or something like, or just,
Bless you.
Thank you.
or current members, majority of all current members.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to
All right.
interpret this any other way. and
Okay.
So thank you. Hey, that's the first one you got shot down. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm quite used to it.
All right. Okay, so let's move this one on. I'm sorry.
I think,
Yeah, Mr. Lombard, 1 second. Are you here to present something? Or you just here to?
I'm observing.
Okay, thank you. No, I just don't want to, I noticed you earlier.
No, that's
But,
Maybe-
wrong me.
right.
maybe it would be currently sitting. Maybe that does make.
Currently sitting,
The majority of
all
all
current sitting,
current sitting members of the board,
correct.
or current sitting.
Of all currently, which one's grammatically correct?
I think currently sitting.
Okay, so let's go with the
Majority of
Currently
all-
sitting
Board of Education, let's go with grammar.
Yep.
During what?
Okay, it's the new language reads, the majority of all currently sitting, should there be less than 9 members of the board, shall be necessary to constitute a quorum for the transaction of business.
Oh, that you see, you're inserting those parentheses as well, or that was just for our purposes? Or should there be less than?
I'm inserting that as well.
Okay.
It just adds clarity to 7, 8, 6. They're all less than 9,
Okay.
which may actually be unnecessary as well, but. So do we accept this as, is everybody comfortable with this language change?
Mhm.
Okay,
I would think that that parentheses should be moved. Are you saying Board of Education or just board?
that's from the old language, but I'm not opposed to adding of
No,
education.
I was just asking because I heard it was being
Yeah.
talked around. So either after the word board or after the word education, if you're putting up education, I think that parentheses belongs there. The majority of all currently sitting currently sitting members of the Board of Education, should there be less than 9? Because I don't think it doesn't sound right earlier on.
Okay, I agree.
Okay.
Did you capture that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you read it again, Mr. Lombard, please?
The majority of all currently sitting members of the Board of Education, should there be less than 9, shall be necessary to constitute a quorum for the transaction of business.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and do we accept this as the final revision to be placed to the full board?
I would move for that. I don't know how to say it for you.
Motion to move policy number 9170, quorum and voting procedures to the full board
So moved.
for our first read. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next one up is 9190, and I don't have that printed out in the packet, but I believe that's,
I do have it.
oh, you do have it?
Yep.
That's the one that just needs the gender change up, like one word change.
Okay, that's fine. It's public hearings, 9190.
So that's one of the ones.
I don't have it.
It's in a hard packet here.
Oh, it's in, thank
It is, yes.
you. I'll read it in its entirety. It's really very short, and it's just a matter of changing gendered language.
Oh, okay.
Public hearings may be held before the board at such times and places as the board may determine. At least 5 days public notice shall be given to the time, place, and purpose of such hearings. Nothing there changes. The board will schedule a public hearing at least once a quarter for a 2-hour period for the purpose of highlighting school, student, and staff achievements. The next line, nothing changes there. The next line is where the change takes place. The chairman which will change to chairperson. And superintendent or the designees will plan the agenda for and preside over all public hearings.
Mhm.
So the only thing that's changing is that one gender term chairman into chairperson.
Okay,
So, does this require any discussion?
no, not from me.
Okay, awesome. So motion to approve the change to 9190 as noted, public hearings.
So moved.
I shall second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's get into. I'm sorry, motion to push this to the full board for a first read.
What's another motion? So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now the next one up on the agenda is a staff-driven item. Dr. Baldwin, if you could take this away from home, do you have a revised, the copy, is the revisions process?
No. I have some handwritten notations from Superintendent Parent that we can discuss.
Right. Yeah, if we could just briefly call for a 2-minute recess.
Okay.
Motion for recess, 2 minutes.
Oh, so moved, sorry.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Okay, we have returned from our recess. All members are still currently available online. Dr. Baldwin, can you take away the 5116 policy, please?
Yes. So 5116 is the attendance policy for elementary and secondary. And so we've included the entire policy language here, but our interest at present is talking about the controlled transfer policy, which is 5116A. We've included everything, but what we want to talk about is 5116A, a controlled transfer policy. I would also say that at some juncture, administratively, the district staff were continuing to look and evaluate our magnet school policy, which you see is in here. We really want to take a look at it from a lens of Title VI, civil rights law and equity, and just make sure that our policy is, thoroughly aligned with federal law. So we're not prepared to really talk about that yet, but I am engaged in that process and met with the cabinet yesterday as part of that. But at some point, we may come back with some modifications based upon a more thorough review and federal law. So that's just a point of information.
Right.
Tonight's conversation more specifically is around the control transfer. And so I think board members know what that is, a control transfer. When a family and a student are zoned to a specific school, they may ask to go to a different school. And that is a controlled transfer, and we have guidelines and direction in place for that process. I can tell you, as deputy with oversight of the secondary schools, I receive a fair amount of requests. And so what we want to do is think about, as a district, how we can better articulate the process and the policy and have some timelines around when these requests can be reviewed and executed. And so do you have access to the policy or no? Yes? Okay. The first page of the policy, item A, says the procedure for applying for controlled transfer is as follows. What we would like to do is maintain all items 1 through 5 and add item 6. We would propose that controlled transfers will not be granted after the last day of the second quarter marking period, so that we don't have people coming to us now, right? We've had quite a bit of time in a school setting. We know that our population is transient. We don't want to continue to, through policy, disrupt children's learning. And so we're proposing that this process would have a timeline to it now, because right now it's quite fluid. So that's really the proposal. We think it will benefit children in terms of
Chair.
learning.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Lombard.
So with how much frequency are situations like that being requested now?
I have 3 on my desk right now.
And what are the typical reasons why this late along it would be asked for, which might be the reason, but why they didn't ask for it earlier?
Typically they might talk about, there might be a challenge in the current setting where they're feeling like the child's not being successful, feeling like supports aren't in place. They might talk about, situations with other students where there's conflict with a group of students. And so that's pretty typical in the requests that I receive, is really building-based conflict and challenge. And so that you're aware, I call the family I talk to the family to just better understand what they wrote on the form. I review what's in Power School and ask them questions about what may have happened. Then I talk to the principal or the assistant principal, depending. And we really try and say, you know, have these interventions been put in place? How have they worked? What other steps are available? Have you met with this family? Is counseling involved? Restorative practices? Very often, it's about access to services, to more supports in school. And, I feel pretty good about some of the requests because when I'm able to call the family back and explain some of the things we can do and ask them to try those and then get back in touch with me, we're in a much better place within 5 to 7 days. The child's in school and doing better.
Thank you. So in situations like that, where it's because of a negative thing they're trying to leave,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully they're hoping for something better, but definitely leaving something that's currently negative. And if for some reason that situation wasn't able to be resolved, either because they haven't tried the resources or at that point they haven't had the effect that they're looking for, what would be an option for a parent who comes to you the day after the second marking period is over, other than stick it out in the school you're in and just keep trying our resources? What would there be an appeal or an exception to this addition to the policy where there could be situations where they could be transferred, or would they have to finish out the year?
Well, I'm a firm believer that has to be a sort of a relief valve in policy. And so, I think that by and large, in some of the situations that I've dealt with, if I've had a timeline and it's really not working and it's detracting, I would move the child. I would grant the control transfer because, we have to meet the child's needs. The child needs to be educated. We've tried resources, but I think that's the piece, right? That it can't, this exercise, this process is important, but it cannot just be transactional. I filled out the form, the appropriate person reviewed it and stamped it yes or no. We really do need to better understand what's happening, do our due diligence to try and make it work. Because some of those problems will follow kids if we don't help grow certain skills or put supports in place.
I really appreciate that. I just would be concerned, though, that if the policy was known, that parent may not even come to you knowing that you might do that. You might make that exception. So my thought is there's room in item 6, number 6, to indicate something, either an appeal process or, something like they won't be granted past this date, barring a special appeal, or I don't know. I mean, that may be creating another administrative task that I don't want to create, but something so that it's known that, look, normally it's going to be no, but in extenuating circumstances, there may be consideration, just so that whoever pays attention to the policies of the parents or their advisors would know, don't just not try. If things are that bad, there may be, something like that.
We'll work on some language and come back at our next meeting for further discussion, because we're talking about this as a leadership team.
Right.
And so I think that feedback is helpful.
Right. Can you read the proposed language again, please?
Be sure. Proposed number 6, which will have another change, is controlled transfers will not be granted after the last day of the second quarter.
Yeah, that would kind of hamstring.
Yeah.
That kind of hamstring and force the student to remain. But I'm a little, I'd say confused, but curious. But if you go down to B in controlled transfers, the controlled transfer may be granted into classrooms. So there's already the ability to pivot
Mhm.
with that language to either approve or disapprove. I know at one time someone, when you have a shall, it's a definite. When you have a may, it's, and then if you go down to the procedure, okay, wait, no, will be granted. Appeal process, wait. Where's the part where it says I'm missing it?
Procedure for appeals,
Yes,
that's item E.
right. Student choice, have an assistant superintendent review the application. And there's already an appeal process that actually ends with us. I remember when we were discussing this, I really didn't want this on our plate.
Well, so it's interesting. We do have a proposed change in procedure, but just before, so we'll get to that because that's the only other proposed change we have. I'm looking at B on the first page, and Mr. Sokolovic, you were just referencing it, B1, that it may be granted. The language in the second sentence says, in grades 9 through 12, a controlled transfer application may be granted on a case-by-case basis by central office administration. Maybe that kind of language, Mr. Lombard, is added to the whole piece of the second quarter as well.
Yeah, a controlled transfer may be granted, in a case-by-case basis after. the
Yes,
date.
yes,
Something
that's
like
what that's what I was thinking.
Right, that still leaves the flexibility.
Yes,
Case by
okay.
case, it up, so.
right. All right, thank you. The next recommended revision of this policy is in item E, which is the procedure for appeals. And
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt? So I was going back to what Mrs. Sokolovic mentioned about the may be granted in B1. Is it in actuality may only be granted, or where, because if the class size is larger than 23, would it not be granted? Or is it that we're leaving it open because it may be in 24 and 25 students? Is that the reason why it says may? Or
no, we should probably have stronger language because that language is aligned with our collective bargaining agreement with the BEA.
so maybe only, control transfer may only be granted into classrooms, blah, blah, blah. And then the same thing with grades 9.
Okay.
Grades 2 through 8. Joe's good at catching those things, right?
Yeah, that I made the change. That's good because it is in contract. Item E, procedures for appeals is as follows. First, those letters should probably be numbers. You see the small letters A through G, so those should become numbers. And our first proposed change is on number 3, current letter C. If the applicant is still not satisfied with the assistant superintendent's decision, the applicant can request in writing that the, what's it say, superintendent?
Of schools?
Yeah, okay, because it's crossed out here on mine. Review the decision. What Ms. Perrin is suggesting is that we cross out the superintendent of schools and make this an appeal committee comprised of the superintendent and a Board of Ed representatives.
So it would be how many member committee?
I think it would be a 3-member committee, and because I would recommend that it's the governance committee, because the issue at hand where the family wants to appeal, they're really appealing a policy of the board.
Well, I wonder if it should be students and families, because these are typically sensitive issues. It's not, because I mean, the policy is the policy, but I'm just for discussion. I feel like this is a parent and a student issue. The reason why they want to change, it's almost teaching and learning too, but, or maybe the committee could have someone from each of those 2 committees.
That's
if
a good idea.
3-member committee, someone from students and families, someone from teaching and learning, or governance, but because I think that their appeal is a personal appeal. It's not a policy appeal. They're saying their situation is so dire or necessary. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Yeah,
Mr. Spinner, you have anything?
Yes, Dr. Bolden, I know I really have experience with this control transfer, very big, when Dr. Arisa Johnson was here. And my son was control transfer with Bassett High School because I moved from the area.
Okay.
And yes, we appeal, the assistant superintendent, read the situation, the principal, he said no, and then I went to the assistant superintendent, and then, Dr. Arisa Johnson was the last person making the decision. Yes, we read the rules, the policy, but my son went to the board of education and
Mm.
he let them know, the board of education, why the reason he wanted to stay. Because my question for you is, if the students, like I had the experience, move from the, let's say, back in high school, but he want to finish high school,
Mhm.
and the parent, that's what do the control transfer.
Mhm.
What's gonna happen? Are they gonna leave the student finish the high school there, or was it what somebody that will?
So no, it is certainly negotiable. I've done that this year where student stays in the setting where they're being educated, even though the family has moved. But we also then make clear, we look and we talk to the family about younger siblings.
Yeah.
Who are, and we say they have to go to the representative high school from their elementary feeder. So we do make those decisions, absolutely.
Okay, but at least they're gonna have it, well, then my question is, they're gonna leave the chance to leave the student finish at least the high school?
Yeah.
And this same policy is gonna be the same thing for the special needs children?
Yeah, I mean,
Although we change.
no, it wouldn't, children with special needs has even greater implications. Some of our schools have different programming in place. And so we really want to take a look at what the child's individualized plan says and recognize if we can meet that plan in the setting where they've been. For many considerations, we should keep the child there.
Mhm.
A child with special needs may have a harder time transitioning and adjusting to a new setting.
Sorry.
So, I was going to stand up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very thoughtful question. And, we want to make sure that our policy fits the needs of all
Mhm.
kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
so,
All right, and I would like to have it to my student family as a chair, because I know governance and teacher learning, you got a lot of things, and like as Lombard said, the students and parents, we can, anything, let's see if I chance, and then I will contact you or one assistant, let them know the process, what we're gonna do.
I'm comfortable with that.
so I was thinking if it's I'm sorry, Joe.
Mr. Lombard, I
Yeah,
haven't gone.
I was thinking if it was a 3-person committee and one of those individuals was the superintendent, and then the other 2 were board members, I was thinking 1 member could be representing from students and families and 1 from teaching and learning. I don't think it's necessary, in my opinion, that governance be involved, because the policy is the policy is the policy. Making an exception to it would be based upon the opinions given by members who deal with teaching and learning, who deal with students and families, and then, of course, the superintendent. So if that's Joe, that's my suggestion.
Okay, now, my turn.
Oh, are you?
Your turn, Joe. You're a
All right,
patient
now-
chair.
Now, I'm coming at this from a whole lot of directions, because this is not my first time on this policy. This is my very first policy in, one of the only things, you always hear me say, we are the authority over the superintendent. We need to keep our power. This is one of the few places where I suggested we cede authority to the superintendent and not have that last level of appeal and let the superintendent's decision be final. Because with the exception of, well, actually nobody is a current educator on the
Mhm.
board. And we are
I
not on the, wait,
I'm not
You
K-12
were.
I'm not K-12, but
oh, okay, I apologize. Nobody's a current K-12 educator, right? For us to, basically, it's the superintendent makes a decision based on the educational best interests, a dispassionate decision. As you know, we as a board could be moved sometimes by public outcry, by emotion, and I feel very reluctant to be in a position to override a superintendent's decision because they have this thing from day one. The same as we contract out, or not contract out, that's not the proper word, give our
Defer?
authorities. Yeah,
Defer?
defer authority on expulsions and all that. We defer that to another committee, otherwise we'd be hearing them every week. I think this is probably another area we should defer to the superintendent. I don't know how everybody feels about that. And I'm one to always just keep in mind who's saying this. This is somebody who's grasping onto like,
Joe, I have a comment.
sure.
So if you further on in the way the policy currently stands, it comes to the board if they're not happy with the superintendent. So this just combines together the board and the superintendent into one, so the decision is truly final. And I would hope that although the committee, I guess, makes its decision at least 2 out of 3 people, I don't know how you're designing it, Dr. Ball, but if all 3 have to be unanimous, is it unanimous or what would it be, this committee?
No, it'd be 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3. So if you have both board members going in opposition to the superintendent, they would trump it, which is what would happen if the superintendent said no and then it came to the board anyway. But in this case, with the superintendent there, I think it actually cooperates the decision more. It brings the superintendent and the board together, and it gives it the authority right then and there. And so it supports the superintendent and the board at the same time, because no one needs to know how the vote was, if it was 2 to 1 or 3 to 0. So it's just, this is the decision of the superintendent and the Board of Education. And so it doesn't go to the full board. Now, let me ask you though, Ms. Baldwin, would there still be an opportunity for that committee's decision to be appealed to the full board?
Not in the proposal, not in the proposal.
So it would stop right there. It would stop.
Yes,
So it's bringing the 2 in together earlier on, in a way.
that is very intentional. That was exactly what Ms. Perrin wanted to do, was to be able to say, let me partner with the board on this specific area of challenge and work together so that the board and the superintendent are hearing what the family might be experiencing, any extenuating circumstances, and together make the decision.
Yeah, and then it's removing it from the full board's agenda. It's removing it from a hearing, because where it is now, the Board of Ed has to schedule a special meeting with the applicant. I mean, that's a lot. That's getting rid of all that. And it's just having 2 reps from the board and the superintendent meet and get it over with. So
I'm sorry. Are we proposing this as like a committee? Because with 2 board members, we still would have the FOIA requirements. Of course, we would probably do something like that in an executive session,
Right.
but it would still require notice, and I guess the superintendent will show up, and a quorum. And if you look to G, that creates a problem, because should the appeal process timelines be not filed by administration, the appeal will be upheld.
Mhm.
So all I got to do is have a schedule within 10 days that we can't make it, that whoever's assigned to the committee cannot make it within a timeline, and that
Right.
it's appealed whether the superintendent wants it or not, it's upheld.
what
Right.
is the time
10 days,
Right now, it's 10 business days, yes,
from when it makes its way to the committee?
correct.
which is less than a special meeting time, which was problematic, scheduling and all the documentation.
Yes,
So see, I don't know if the superintendent would be comfortable with taking that power alone. But I don't know, maybe we should ask the current superintendent
Mhm.
if that's a power she would like conferred on her. And have it discussed between whether, because if she's comfortable with it and if she can make a case for why the board shouldn't, I think that would be a reasonable request to listen to.
So you're saying change it, but not with this proposal. So you're saying take the board out altogether.
Yes, and have the superintendent be the full and final.
Then in Mr. Benahan's case, he never would have got his kid in high school. Because it went to the board and they
No.
approved it.
correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bennett, he just, we never heard the case, we heard him at public comment.
Who?
Your son,
He was on the board. He went to the board education.
it went a whole board hearing?
Yeah. He went and he read a letter and he let him know, so, yeah.
I don't think we can skirt our responsibility. I think this is, cutting it a little shorter. I think it's being proposed because someone thinks it makes sense, but maybe it's not the best way. Maybe leaving it just the way it is the best way. But this is a proposal by interim superintendent Perrin, is that right? Or
That
it-
is correct. Yeah, this language is from Ms. Perrin, and she is interested in having a representative group of the board and she sit together
Right.
as part of that appeal process.
And her reason is because she. 10
Correct.
days-
That is correct.
10 days
Yes,
before.
it's like a grievance procedure, and there's timelines at each level.
Yeah, I'm also concerned with, of course, I'll go with the majority of the board, but if anybody recalls when we created new committees, health, safety and all that, who wants to serve on the committee? And the Males of Color Committee, when people tried to save it, and I said, I wasn't willing to chair it anymore because I felt the form was bad. And when they asked, everybody was strongly saying, yes, 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 we'll do this. And when it came time to serve on the committee or to serve as chair, when asked, we heard crickets.
So Joe, this would be another committee of the board
That's what it sounds like.
or an administrative committee? Or what is?
I would envision it because it's two board members. What I heard tonight was, a student and families representative, the chair or someone from the committee, and then someone from teaching and learning. Two people. So what I would envision is that if we learned that a family wanted to go through this proposed appeals process, what we would do is the superintendent's office would reach out to Mr. Benahan and say, Mr. Benahan, we have a pending appeals for controlled transfer. We're going to reach out to members of your committee. These are the dates that we think we can hold the meeting. Are you available on this day? And then we would reach out to teaching and learning and Ms. Baptiste Perez and say, we have this controlled transfer. Are you available on these days? And then once confirmed, the superintendent's office would send a letter to the family and contact the family and confirm that this appeals hearing for a controlled transfer can take place.
So it's not a standing committee of the board? It's
No.
not-
No,
It's just participation by board members from committees. So
correct.
I see.
Because we don't want another committee.
No.
We really got enough.
Would-
We really got enough.
I think we would just have to protect ourselves and just maybe see if it's FOIA compliance.
Sure, I can check that.
Does it
And
need-
Maybe through CAPE, without incurring
Mhm.
expenditure if possible.
Mhm.
Does it need to be the same board members each time there's an appeal?
No,
Oh, well, then it could be any two members that are available.
that's correct.
Have to be from students and families and teaching and learning. I mean, it's a nice idea, but if it's not a standing committee, then
Right.
it doesn't need set members. It's just drawing on people. Like I think, for example, when we were doing the contract negotiations, I think it was it was with the union. I can't remember right now, but I sat in because I did on some of the talks, not with the union, but with our attorney, with our CFO, to be a representative from the board. I wasn't part of a committee. I wasn't assigned. I was just asked to do it. Lots of us, may do things. So if it's something like that, being able to get people to attend that meeting in a timely fashion might not be that difficult. If in that case, you go to the chairperson of the board, in this case, Bobby Brown, say, can you see if there's a couple of your board members that can make this meeting? It could be anybody. She might go to teaching and learning first and students and families first, but it doesn't have to be if it's not a standing committee. So,
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, you bring up a good point with the negotiation committee. You also have the COVID committees that I sat on as well, weren't publicly noticed. So there is precedence for that. So you are correct there. But the other thing you mentioned that gives me a little concern with not having fixed members is Not anyone, we're not writing policy for people who are here today, possibly people who are here tomorrow, or superintendent here is tomorrow. Board member shopping,
Mm,
to pick to have the two board members
mhm.
who would be most likely to agree with that current superintendent. So I believe probably fixing, if we're gonna go this route, fixing the board members to serve a certain term on that said committee, rather than have cherry pick board members from meeting to meeting. Does that make any sense?
There's sense to that. There's sense to that. But then still, those are cherry picked board members by the chairperson, you know, or whatever. They're picked by somebody at some
Right.
point, you know, so.
Well, and I think, you know, in my past experience, I worked in districts that did not have hearing officers for expulsion hearings. So you would have to assemble a panel of the board. And we always tried for 4 board members because you need three votes to either expel or not expel, but you need 3. And so we would always try and get 4. And one of the things you have to do is you also have to make sure that there's no conflict of interest. You know, sometimes people might be neighbors, or you might go to the same house of worship with them, and you may be familiar with people, and that may make it hard, you know, to serve impartially. So I think there may be times where it can't be the same panel of people. And in my experience, I rarely had like the same 4 board members at expulsion proceedings. And it's good to have that variety, because people really have to engage in what's being presented and evaluate it from sort of the policy perspective and their own lens. I recognize the concern that Mr. Sokolovic is raising, but there may be some, while not intended, because people may know some of these families, board members may have to recuse themselves.
Yeah, so it's kind of like 6 to 1, half dozen the other.
Right.
So-
That's what I'm thinking, but I don't know.
So I would think, you know, we want to take consideration then the greatest likelihood of getting participation. So whatever that would be, you know, maybe having it open to whoever's available or whatever. I don't know. I don't work that part of it, but so it really comes down to, do we want to leave it as it is, let the superintendent make the decision, and if the family's still not happy with that, then the whole board decides, not just 2 members of the board with the superintendent? Or do we want to compress the process, take the full board out of it, we don't make a decision anymore, and just have either just the superintendent as Joe's proposing, or the superintendent with 2 board members? So,
Mr. Bennett?
I understand what Dr. Bolden said and Mr. Lombard said, but in my situation with my experience, when they deny to my son, you know, and that's why he go to the board.
Mhm.
And then the board tell to the superintendent, I want you discuss this situation, because I'm agree what you said. As you know how I am with parents,
Mhm.
you know, maybe it's a friend or family calls to me, and I'm gonna be, you know, so I agree with that part. So I want to be fair.
Mhm.
You know, so I now prefer to have like a 3 or 4 people as made the decision. I just prefer, you know, okay, peel the situation, it's assistant say no, and then you bring it to the board, and then the board talk to the superintendent, Miss Perrin, you know, please figure out the situation, because we heard, you know, she was denied, and then from there get the process. Because as you say, maybe I know somebody, you know, or the other person said, you
Sure.
know, so.
Right.
Like, you know, confess.
Right.
You know, that's my opinion, so.
Couple of questions I got is, if somebody's denied at level 1, are they given the appeal process at that step?
They do. They go up.
Okay, that's the way I remember the conversation from last time. So now, when they're going up the chain, how many denials were there in the, say, ballpark the last 2 years? So, it's rough with COVID in the middle.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean,
Because I know we haven't heard a single appeal in at least 4 years.
Yep. I said for you.
so I'm leaning toward leaving the policy alone. I don't agree, Joe, with the idea of taking the board out altogether. I think we need to be a last resort. But that's just my opinion. You know, I don't agree with that. I think we should be there, especially in the case of Mr. Benahan's situation. Like the board was the last resort, and that was that. I think there are going to be very few, but we should be there for the public if they need it. If they're not getting where they need to get with the superintendent, they have the opportunity of a 9-member board to hear their case. So I think we should leave it. I think I understand maybe some of the sentiment that Ms. Perrin has with compressing the process and taking the board and the superintendent into one, but that's just 2 members of the board. Who are they? Who am I? You know, I think having the full board hear the case in those rare cases, like Joe just pointed out, how often does it happen? You know, that it wakes it all the way up. So my take on it is to leave it just the way it is. So that's me. So.
Yeah, but I definitely want to bring this back because I do want to hear from Ms. Perrin in person to hear the rationale before we make a decision, if that makes sense, Mr. Lombard.
Sure, that's fine.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so I don't want to table it just yet because I got other things in the policy I think may be beneficial to look at now since we got it before us. On the first page.
Control transfer policy for
Attendance.
attendance. Okay, 5116. Yep.
Correct. It says the board shall, upon recommendation of the superintendent, school boundary lines that define areas of the city from which students attend school of various level. Pupils will attend the school designated within the school boundary in which the pupil resides. If you recall, this policy, and I believe it's 16.1 as well, was something we bumped up against in the situation of Hooker and, why am I forgetting the second name?
Ross?
Cross.
Hooker and Cross. And this is the reason it didn't get immediately implemented is because of this language in the policy, because we had to actually bring this policy up to waive it, which was the sticking point. Now we're coming up to an area where the fiscal cliff is. And if we're redrawing boundary lines and doing all this, and I think we need to provide the superintendent and leadership with a little bit of flexibility in this policy and make such a change such as pupils will attend schools designated within the boundary lines which the pupil resides, or as the needs of the district dictate. I haven't thought too hard on this one, so.
I know why you're saying this, because yes, we weren't able to move in that one meeting. We had to put it as an agenda item on another meeting to waive it so we could potentially do it.
Right.
But I don't think we should change the policy for those situations because that opens it up too much. I think an administrator or superintendent could say, the district needs this and start willy-nilly moving things around. Not haphazardly, the superintendent's a professional person, but I feel like having it in place, having the boundary of the boundaries, having them in place is important. And then for those hopefully rare situations where it comes to the board, we can waive it, you know, but I don't think those floodgates should be open. I think it should be strict. Like, this is it. Here, we draw these lines, you attend the school within your boundaries. And then if something comes up, then we could waive it. I just think if we leave it open from the beginning, it allows for manipulation that may not be something the board would be comfortable with, you know. Whereas
Well, I also think,
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Lombard.
No,
I
it's
also
okay.
think to your point, the operations and business of the district are deeply affected by the attendance zones and boundary lines. We need to be able to anticipate enrollment and staffing and how many children will be in a specific school. All of that information helps us to drive the daily operation. So a firm and defined attendance zone is important. And we may, in time, have to change those attendance zones and redraw them in different ways. That's not uncommon. It's certainly not popular, but it's not uncommon to have to do that. But from an administrative, day-to-day operation, we need firm attendance zones.
All right, okay, I can withdraw that. It's just a thought because it did become a impediment to getting. So that makes sense. But barring that, I'm just noticing something else. There is no real exception in this for control transfers in that one policy. Do you think maybe we should say something except in the case of control transfers? Because control transfers necessarily most of the time out of the school.
Well, but in order for us to enact a control transfer and entertain it, the person has to first be in their assigned boundary zone. They have to be going to, Hooker and then tell us, we don't want to be here. We want to control transfer someplace else for a compelling reason.
Yeah, point taken. And then that was 5116.1 as well. That was my next thing. Street guy. Okay,
Where is it?
I have nothing further on this item. That was my one thing. And I guess we're gonna look into postpone the rest of this until the next governance meeting. So
Yeah, put it back on the next agenda, right? And we'll do some work on our end to have some maybe suggested revisions as needed. And I'll talk to Ms. Perrin about attending so that she can better speak to the controlled transfer and engage you in that conversation and then help the committee determine where to go.
Awesome.
Okay.
You agree?
Yes,
So
yes. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I missed.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the time is now 7:56. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I shall second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Albert votes. All right, thanks, everybody.
Take care, Lombard. God bless you.